Hi, I'm Matthias. One of the things that I loved to do when I first started playing the guitar was writing my own music. Of course, my chord knowledge wasn't that great, and like many beginners, everything I played was just root position power chords. As I learned more about music, I realized that I needed to take a more musical approach to writing and understand how chords function within keys. In this lesson, I've written a chromatic bass line in the key of A minor, and I'll show you how to voice the right chords so that you can apply these same concepts in your writing. First, here's the bass line. So what I'm doing is taking just a bass line. This is all going to be on the 5th string, and I'm just starting with the open string, note A, and then just walking up A, B, C, and then continuing up chromatically C sharp, D, D sharp, and E. So just starting at A, finishing at E. I'm skipping over A sharp right there, and it's just moving up chromatically once we hit B. Now if I take each one of these notes and just play root position power chords, here's what I end up with. So if I take that same bass line and make these all into root position power chords, sounds pretty cool, especially if I'm just learning to play. It's like, all right, I've got a song. But there's some problems here, because what I've done is just by taking root position power chords, I'm playing out of the context of a key. And the key that I want to be in for this bass line that I've done is the key of A minor. So if we just look at some of these power chords, we can see how they're not going to fit. So if I start off with my first one, A5, okay, that one's fine. That fits. That's my first one. But with my next bass note being B, the 5th of that chord, if I turn that into a root position power chord, the 5th becomes F sharp. And F sharp is not going to fit in the key of A minor right there. Moving up, I've got a root position C5 power chord. So that one's fine. But when I get to C sharp, that G sharp right there, that's going to be outside of the key of A minor. D5's fine. And then D sharp, well, D sharp's not even in there, so the bass note is completely outside. And then the 5th of that, A sharp, doesn't fit. And then, of course, we get to our E5, which is fine. So several chords in there that we're going to have to make adjustments in order for this bass line that I've written to fit in the key of A minor. Playing all root position power chords doesn't work for this bass line, but here's how I can voice this so that I stay in key. So what I've now done is I've taken this chromatic bass line that I've created, and I've realized chords on top of that stay within the key of A minor. So here's what I've done. So my first one, I'm sticking with an A5, but with the bass note going to B, what I'm then doing is, rather than playing a root position power chord, I'm actually playing the interval of a minor 6th right here. So keeping my index finger on B, I'm then going to hit the G with my 4th finger. This is going to be the 5th fret of the 4th string. So the actual chord that I'm creating right there is a G chord. It's an inverted G chord, so a lot of times you'll see that written as a G over a B. And then what I can do is, as my bass note moves to C, I can keep my 4th finger right there on G, and that'll give me a C5 power chord. Then, just walking up on the 5th string chromatically up to C sharp right there, I'll take my 4th finger, move that up to the 7th fret for another interval of a minor 6th right there. Now, that C sharp up to the E right there, what we're actually creating is a borrowed chord, because that C sharp is not in the key of A minor. And the way we know what type of borrowed chord this is by the next chord in the sequence, which becomes a D5. So we've got this chord that's kind of out of place, going to D5 right there. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to step outside of the key of A minor just for a second. And because I'm ending up on D5 right here, I'm going to use my key of D. And what I'm doing is, if I think tonically in the key of D, what is my 5 chord? What is the dominant chord? Well, that chord is an A chord or an A7 chord. And so what I've done here is I've taken 2 notes out of that A7 chord. I've got a C sharp, which is the 3rd, and then an E right here with my 4th finger, which is the 5th. And so that chord is what is called a secondary dominant. So I've taken that out of the key of D, and then I'm resolving to a D chord. The same then is going to be true as I move past the D chord, because then I have a D sharp right here going to a B right there. Okay, so obviously D sharp does not fit in the key of A minor, but with this interval of a minor 6th, it's going to then resolve, and I'm going to take that up to an E sus chord, and then resolve to an E major. So what I'm doing here is the same thing, creating a secondary dominant. I'm looking at my E major chord right here. I'm going to temporarily borrow from that key. So in the key of E, my 5 chord, my dominant chord, is going to be a B chord. So a B chord, D sharp in the bass, and then B right here. So I'm just taking 2 notes out of that B chord, and then that resolves then to an E chord. So rather than just playing an E5 right here, which I could, I decided to suspend it, which means I'm playing the interval of a 4th right here, E up to A, and then resolving it to the 3rd right here. So all I've done for that whole sequence is just alternate between root position power chords and minor 6 chord inversions. And with the simple riff that I created, here's how this progression sounds in action. This is just one example of how you can make your guitar writing more musical. Of course, these are just guidelines, but if you start with learning your basic fundamentals of scales and chords, I think you'll find that your writing will really improve. If you want to work on more concepts like this, check out my other lessons on creating riffs using power chords and chord inversions. And if you're a beginner, get a copy of my metal guitar method to help you get started. I'm Matthias. Now go forth and rock.